I don't think that I ever will be a total vegan. I stress to eat less meat, but not to eat no meat.
Good day, Dr. Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity. There is a movement out there I'm just sharing with you called the reducetarian movement. The reducetarian, a bit of an awkward word to say. This is a book that recently came out by Brian Cateman.
Well, you can safely take a deep sigh of relief knowing that I am a carnivore just like you, even if we ourselves choose to eat eggs and meat. We know our planet is in trouble, and we know that meat production, from the clearing of land and trees to the transportation of these products, accounts for nearly 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Raising livestock it creates 28% of our greenhouse gases in the world. So if you're into any of that, then it means a lot to you to go and cut down, because we have to reduce our greenhouse gases, because we are killing 7 million people a year because of our pollution.
That is why a vegetarian's footprint is nearly half that of a meat lover's. And for a vegan, it's even lower. And we also know that meat production requires a lot of water. Producing just 1 pound of meat protein requires 10 times the amount of water as producing 1 pound of grain protein. It's a lot of water. And we also know, perhaps most morally salient, that due to factory farming, that animals are not treated very well. They're not. And they are incredibly smart and experience pain just like us.
I eat meat much less than I ever did before. I eat maybe 2 times a week meat. I eat chicken, I eat fish, I eat much more fish products than I ever did before, and green. I mean, I love vegetables and salads and all this. I think it's very healthy for our body. So I'm into that. You don't have to be into that. I just think that we all should work together to reduce our pollution, because we kill less people, and I think this is a very important issue.
À-bas-le-ciel.
So I said to you conversationally the other day, but I wasn't really joking around. In reference to reducetarianism and the core issues of veganism, I said to you, you know, Melissa, I can imagine a lot of different scenarios in which I'd find out that you'd murdered somebody, and I'd be okay with it. You know, like, you know, murder is a serious crime, but I can imagine a lot of circumstances. I've been in pretty crazy circumstances myself where it's like, wow, you know, that's too bad. Or like, you know, I'd commiserate. I'd be like, wow, I'm sure you regret doing that or whatever. Or maybe not. Maybe the situation is so extreme that it's like, yeah, if you were in that situation again, you'd kill him again. You know what I mean? But I was like, it's actually quite easy to imagine all kinds of circumstances in which committing actual murder of another human being is something I would accept. Of course, it's not something you approve of or celebrate. Of course, war itself. You know, if you think war, you don't murder people. Sure you do. Yeah. You know. But, you know, by contrast, you know, it would really be impossible for me to accept if you decided you wanted to go back to eating, like, hamburgers bought from, you know, any of the fast food restaurants that surround us. I can't imagine. Okay, yes, your airplane crashed on a desert island, and fine, you can come up with ridiculous scenarios, and the only way to survive was eating at a McDonald's. I mean, you know, whatever, it's ridiculous. But it's funny. It's not about it being worse than murder. But this comes under a bunch of different headings. It comes up in terms of the reducetarian thing, with people trying to make this argument for reducetarianism, a so-called pragmatic argument for reducetarianism that I don't find pragmatic at all. It comes up in, for example, the controversy we've just been seeing with Joey Carbstrong, where for whatever reason, I mean, there are all kinds of issues worth talking about in terms of veganism, in terms of what Joey Carbstrong's been doing and so on. But what the press has latched onto is exactly the use of words, like the use of the term rape, the use of the term murder, the semantics of whether or not vegans have the right to use these words, you know, in a certain way. It seems to me it's the least worth discussing element of all the issues raised by that. But is it or is it not offensive to allegorically refer to these things as murder? But I've got to tell you, from my perspective, again, whether it's you or, again, let's talk about my own daughter. Flip a coin. What do you think? When my daughter grows up, how many times is she going to commit murder? We don't know. You don't know your own kids. You don't know what they're going to go. But I can imagine, of course, there are some circumstances in which murder would be unforgivable, and I'd be shocked, and I'd break up with you, or I'd want to stop talking to my daughter or something, or it's so terrible and it's so awful. Yeah. But I can imagine a lot of circumstances. I've been through real situations myself, blah, blah, blah. Anyone who's got a certain level of life experience and political awareness and what have you, when push comes to shove, some people get shoved and some people get pushed. Don't quote me on that. But it's awful. But that's the world we live in. And yet this moral and ethical cause, how is it possible that this is applauded and this is treated seriously as pragmatism? So the initial speech, I think the speech that really did launch the so-called reducetarian movement, the justification given for reducetarianism is simply the desire to eat buffalo wings and cheese and eggs.
So as we look into the eyes of this very adorable baby pig, we have to ask ourselves, why do over 90% of Americans continue to eat meat? Bacon. Bacon is the reason we eat meat. For many, the mere smell of bacon in the morning, that crispy, crunchy texture, that savory, salty taste, they give us a reason to smile. That spicy buffalo wing, that juicy steak, they are the reason we eat meat.
I find that so weak. And in the same video, in the same presentation, I'll put in a clip of it. He acknowledges the weight of the ethical argument. He acknowledges the weight of the ecological and environmental argument. It's like, well, we know this is the right thing to do, but it would cause us some discomfort, And I'm sorry, my girlfriend Melissa, I think you've seen all 900 videos on this channel. Pretty close to all 900 videos. So you have
most of them, yeah.
You have heard this from me before. But, again, I don't know what kind of life experience these people have, but like, what if you have a brother or a cousin who's a cocaine addict, and you've really got to make the argument to them. You've really got to say to them, like, yeah, I know you love Coke. I know you love the flavor. Put it that way. Of course it's not the flavor. You love the effect this drug has on you. But I want you to take seriously some sense of moral responsibility just for being a better human being, just for being all you can be, and quit using cocaine. Eating chicken wings, this kind of garbage, eating cheese on toast or something. You think it compares to cocaine? And for our generation, just let's be real. I mean, addictive drugs, recreational drugs, our whole generation is in the shadow of recreational drugs. Even if you stayed clean, even if someone like Donald Trump. I don't know. Do you know this about Donald Trump? Donald Trump, his brother was an alcoholic. I don't know if he used other drugs. Also, especially if you're a millionaire and you're an alcoholic, it's easy for alcohol to be a gateway drug. But yeah. Donald Trump watched one of his older brothers destroy his life with alcohol, and then Donald Trump resolved he would never even try it. And he claims he's never even tasted alcohol. Like, he went his whole life without ever using alcohol or ever using any recreational drug. And in that sense, I think those of us who are teetotalers, however you want to put it, those of us who totally refuse to use drugs now, still our refusal is in the shadow of that, right? Still, like, both of us, we were talking about this with Quest and stuff, we've grown up around so many people whose lives have been destroyed or distorted by drugs. It's this huge thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm just saying, I don't think it's a trivial or ridiculous comparison to say if you know this, you know the ecological and ethical argument, you know the importance of this, and then you refuse to take responsibility for your own actions, you refuse to do the right thing, just for the sake of, I guess, sensual indulgence. Like, to me, it's debatable whether or not deep fried chicken wings taste good. I mean, I think it's like, is it that philosophical? Like, are chicken wings revolting or not? I mean, I think even most meat eaters, you can remember eating shit like that, right? Chicken wings? There are little bits of, the sinews and crap. Yeah. The skin. It's pretty revolting what you're putting in your body. When I was a child, I found all that stuff revolting. I had to overcome that,
Yeah, I did too. I just hated anything that had a bone in it.
Right.
So,
You know,
I never eat.
and seeing the bones on the plate afterwards.
Yeah, it's terrible.
The awareness of the waste. But let me tell you something. When you snort cocaine off a plate, there are no bones left afterwards. You know? I mean, how do you expect to live in a society where people discipline themselves that way? To refuse, myriad drugs. Cocaine is not the only one.
You can't. And I think Canada's drug policy, or at least
Right.
what I've seen of it so far, shows that
Right.
the Canadian government doesn't expect people to refuse drugs. They act accordingly and
Right.
understand that people, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
striking difference compared to where we were in China or anywhere in China. I didn't see drug addicts on the street in China, but I see drug addicts on the street in Canada. And I don't know, like, what, I don't know the answer, but, like, I think it does really...
I know. I look, on one
have to do
hand,
with that.
I think it really does kind of go back, for me, my response, it does kind of go back to Socrates and Plato and, the unexamined life is not worth living and living a meaningful life and these kinds of questions. Not what is the meaning of life, but how do we live meaningful lives? And then coming up with answers that really have force and meaning and give us a sense of direction and purpose. There was a famous novel written in Canada, so it's especially famous in Canada, about World War I. And the novelist in an interview said, now, is this true or not? It's something the novelist said in an interview, that he decided to write the novel. He took on the whole direction of the novel when he interviewed a very elderly veteran of World War I. Mm-hmm. And he asked him about kind of, well, why did you guys do it kind of thing? Like, what motivated? Perfect timing!
Phone call.
Who could be... Okay, let's keep rolling. We can edit this after this.
Hello? I'm sorry. Can you just tell me who is this that's calling?
So look, I totally forget where we were in this conversation. Do you remember? Because I have another jumping off point. In the pro-reducetarian video, which has I think about 500,000 views, which is in some ways a hit video and in some ways not. Like compared to anything on Tana Mongeau's channel, it's not that big a deal in YouTube. But they've got 500,000 views introducing the concept of reducetarianism at a TED Talk. And at one point, he really is ridiculing vegans.
Well, we've all had that conversation before. You're out to dinner with a friend or a colleague, and you learn that the person you're with is a vegan. You had no idea. You're surprised. And while the person in front of you may not look like this, or like this, your perception of them has immediately changed. There is no going back to whatever it was you thought of them before this moment.
Like, I think it's important to point that out. He shows a picture of a hippie and he tries to get a laugh out of the audience, and this is pointing the finger at vegans, saying, ha ha, laugh at the vegans. And I think it's really important to point out, gay rights went through a phase like this. I've mentioned this at some point in the last 900 videos on this channel. Yeah. But, there was a phase, there was this famous TV show called Soap, and there was this period where laughing at gay stereotypes, of course some people were uncomfortable with it, of course some people were offended by it, but it was almost like a step forward from no recognition at all to people having a laugh about the fact, and at least admitting openly that homosexuality exists, even if they're ridiculing it. But pretty quickly we move past that. In every way in our culture to saying, no, look, you got to recognize, these people come from a very particular struggle that includes being burned at the stake. I'm sorry, but the persecution of homosexuals has historically been a very real thing. In Muslim countries, still today, it's a very real thing. Mostly being stoned or executed, being thrown off a building and this kind of thing. But, this is real. And, that we still have, refugees, human rights claims on the basis of being homosexual in countries where homosexuality is illegal, still today in 2018. And, in that sense, it's not a laughing matter. Of course, we still have stand-up comedy joking about gay stereotypes. Of course, there's also some room for that. But, it's even worse when you're talking about vegans, when you're ridiculing vegans, because vegans are people who actively have chosen this as an ethical position, as their attempt to make the world a better place, whether it's more for ecology or animal rights or ethics or whatever combination, or health, what have you. But the health crusade is a crusade in its own way too. People who want to get rid of cancer and heart attacks, this is its own shred of moral fiber, no doubt. And this is what you're doing, is you're ridiculing these people while presenting yourself as offering a more pragmatic solution to the same problems. How can it be pragmatic to not practice what you preach? I want to come back to, drugs, alcohol, cocaine, etc. There's a lot of work here in Victoria, in Vancouver, in being a drug counselor. We're offering various kinds of social services for people who are former drug addicts or current drug addicts. Can you do that job if you use cocaine yourself once a month? What about twice a month? What about once a week? Is there a position of being a moderate cocaine addict, counseling people who are out of control cocaine addicts about how to be moderate? On a totally theoretical, philosophical level, I think many people could answer yes. Maybe if a teenager is watching this who doesn't have real life experience with this stuff, they might say yes. Maybe some people would say theoretically, someone with that kind of lifestyle, someone using cocaine once a month, maybe they can relate more to the addicts. You know what I mean? Maybe they can be a better counselor because they're still a cocaine user. You know what I mean? But I think, in the real world, for a lot of different reasons, including this thing that, hypocrisy is real. These questions of who are we and who do we aspire to be, it has real gravitas. I think you can't. It's totally unacceptable to even use cocaine once a month and be a drug counselor, helping addicts. If you accept the position, and many people may not, but then that's not a good role for you. That's not a good job for you. If you accept the dogmatic position, it may just be dogmatic, that human beings should not use cocaine, that, cocaine is not fit for human beings, put it that way, then how can you dabble in cocaine while preaching to others to quit the drug?
I eat meat much less than I ever did before. I eat maybe 2 times a week meat. That raising livestock creates 28% of our greenhouse gases in the world.
That is why a vegetarian's footprint is nearly half that of a meat lover's. And for a vegan, it's even lower. Well, you can safely take a deep sigh of relief knowing that I am a carnivore just like you.
If you take the position, the world's in a position of ecological crisis, this is immoral, this is unethical, etc., but you're still going to do it a couple times a month, whatever the rate is.
Yeah.
Again, it's not actually from a philosophical position. I think you can't. I think a teenager or someone looking at it just theoretically might say, "Oh, someone in that position is even better able to preach because they eat meat once in a while. They know what it's like or something." But I think it's profoundly incoherent. It's a dead end in every way, and it's not pragmatic.
It doesn't make sense, but I mean, a lot of human behavior doesn't make sense. Yeah. But a lot of people will eat something decadent and say, "Oh, it's so bad, but it's so good," and that for them is thrilling or in some way devious and satisfying.
And I think cocaine even more so. But go on, yeah.
Yes,
it doesn't compare, but right, but yeah.
I think a lot of people that are reducetarian have this understanding that what they're doing is wrong, but
right.
They just pretend they can't help themselves, or maybe they really can't help themselves. We're two strong-willed people.
Yeah.
We're both people that have completely quit alcohol, any drugs,
right.
any animal products, and some people. I don't know. Look, I don't know. Can you really have that expectation for everybody?
Let's. I want to bring this back to rape and murder, which is what got Joey Carbstrong in hot water. Yeah. We have one famous vegan, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is a former heavyweight boxer. Mike Tyson is a convicted rapist. Yeah. He was convicted of raping one person once. Okay, I assume he's guilty. I'm just going to be honest with you. He had his day in court. He had a very good lawyer. It's not like he's a poor person who didn't have a good legal defense. I assume that he was convicted because he's guilty. Nice guy, Mike Tyson. Interesting guy. Philosophically, not very well spoken, but if you can understand what he's saying. I've had some clips of him on this channel saying some philosophically interesting things. And he's a real vegan. He's not a fake vegan. He's a real vegan. Now, of course, it's terrible. Rape is a serious crime. He did his time in prison, etc. He's a convicted rapist who went to jail for it. But evaluating the moral character of someone like that is totally different from someone who is committing rape whenever they feel like it or a couple of times a month. Or even if they don't, if that's just their attitude, is that whenever they feel like it, you know. Now again, murder, I don't know how many times anyone commits murder in a lifetime. I honestly can't come up with an example parallel offhand. But again, I can imagine if it's my own girlfriend or my own daughter or one of my own brothers. I have so many brothers. Probably one of them has committed murder and just never told me. I wish I was joking, but I'm not. You know what I mean? People get themselves into situations where they end up killing someone to get out of it or whatever the story is. Life is full of desperate, unforeseen circumstances. And, of course, it's bad and it's awful and it's tragic. And, but the contrast between that and the attitude of doing something is unethical, is immoral, and that you actively preach is immoral, but doing it whenever you feel like it because it feels good. It's funny because, as I said, these people are getting at Joey Carbstrong like, well, how dare you call this murder? How dare you call this rape? There is a sense in which I've got to say eating a hamburger whenever you feel like it is really worse from my perspective. I can't sympathize at all, out of weakness, out of what desire? Sorry, depressing topic of conversation.
Yeah, it is. I don't. You were just talking the other day saying that you had watched an interview with Kevin Smith's wife.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And when he was really overweight, he would wake up, and before having breakfast, he would eat. He would eat candy every morning.
Handfuls of jelly beans was the precise quote. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and she said it made him happy. That was his happy place.
Yeah.
So, I guess for people,
a lot of people.
It's so cruel, like that is if bacon is your happy place, dead animal flesh is your happy place. It's really fucked up.
If it's cocaine, if it's rape, if it's murder, there are plenty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that doesn't make it acceptable. It's just trying to understand the motives behind it. Yeah.
Anyway, it's weird. I've been reading about the history of the Civil War in England in the 1640s, and that was really the period when some of the basic concepts of religion and politics were changing in England, and where the idea of the church coercing people into good behavior was really switching over to the idea that you and I ourselves voluntarily form churches and coerce ourselves into good behavior, which is very much the model of Protestantism in the United States of America. Partly it was very influential in the colonization of and later government of America and so on. But that's also one of the funny things about veganism is we're never talking about these things in terms of actual coercion, in terms of like the equivalent of the medieval Catholic Church forcing people not to eat meat. It's really just asking people to live by the dictates of their own conscience and to take some responsibility for the consequences of their own actions. Again, ecologically as well as in terms of, whatever you want to say, ethics, animal suffering, or what have you. If you wouldn't slit this pig's throat yourself. Yesterday we talked to that guy. We talked to the guy in the shop. He was talking about he could never kill a fish himself. He could never go fishing himself and even club a fish on the head or whatever. He eats meat every day. It's like, okay. I by contrast, I would have no problem with cutting down a cocaine leaf, cutting down cocaine plants, but I don't want to use cocaine. I see nothing unethical in the growing or harvesting of the plant, but there are all these unethical things thereafter, But yeah, it's just interesting the very idea of free association and of people morally policing themselves in the English language tradition really emerged in that period in the 1640s. And of course, the other thing that's very funny about it when you're reading about that period was people were really enthusiastic. People thought, like, now that we've got the Pope out of our lives, and now that we've got the episcopacy out of our lives, now that we've got the bishops out of our lives, with no more bishops bossing us around, now we can really get down to business. And of course, one of the results was Puritanism. Yeah. One of the results was persecuting witches and stuff. A great example, in the history book, a small town in England. Of course, the church spire was the highest point in the town. It's true in many traditional villages. So it got struck by lightning, more often than you might So whenever it got struck by lightning, they'd interpret that as a sign of God's dissatisfaction, and they'd start persecuting heretics and people of lax morals. They'd start their own little witch hunt, or whatever you want to say. Because people were really enthusiastic to take over policing their own morality at that time. And anyway, look, I mean, duty is a kind of terrible and frightening thing. You know, you read the history of almost any culture, you know, China, Japan, Western Europe, what have you, any culture we have a lot of written records for, even India. And the massacres and, abominations that a sense of duty and honor drives people to is enough to convince you, okay, maybe it's better that we have a society that's composed of stoned idiots who play video games. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty scary what duty and honor-based societies are like. But it is also scary to me that we now live in a society, in an era where people are so totally fixated on their own self-indulgence with no sense of duty, that this is what we've got to debate. And that reducetarianism can be perceived as pragmatic at all.
You can change the world by ordering a smaller steak.
You can change the world by ordering a smaller steak.
Any last words, Level?
This is a very depressing topic of conversation.
Click on the link below this video and join my Patreon to cheer us the fuck up.
À-bas-le-ciel.